Do you have constitutional questions? Get constitutional answers. We'll be answering your constitutional questions live, so get ready to call in now. Are you a prosecutor, law enforcement officer, or local government employee? Want to make sure you are executing the laws in a constitutional manner? Are you a city council member, township board member, or state legislator? Want to ensure the laws you pass are constitutional? Perhaps you're a citizen who wants to know the proper limits on government and the protections for your God-given liberties. Regardless of your role, call me, Constitutional Attorney Catherine Henry, with your constitutional questions during our live call-in show now at the phone number listed on the screen. And remember, together we can restore freedom.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Of course, I go to say a greeting and find I can't really speak, so that's a great start to the show. And also, it looks like my camera was moved, so I was a little off screen there. Oh, let's see if I can get back. Anyway, all right, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time zone you might be located in right now. Thank you for joining us. This is Restore Freedom Weekly, and I'm Constitutional Attorney Catherine Henry, and today we're going to talk about, as always, your legal and constitutional questions. And keep in mind that funny thing is, I see there's already some questions about licensing, and we're going to get into that. But as it stands, I am only currently admitted to practice or licensed to practice law in the state of Michigan. The let's see, it used to be the state of Minnesota. I stopped wanting to pay dues there a long time ago, but the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Court, Eastern and Western Districts of Federal District Court in Michigan, United States Supreme Court. I feel like I'm forgetting one or two, quite honestly. But anyway, so I'm not licensed to practice in all 50 states by any stretch of the imagination. So that comes out, though. If you have a question, you call me and you say, I have a question about something happening in Oklahoma. That's the first thing I'm going to say to you is, well, in general, laws are this, this, and this, but I don't know what the statutes or court rules on point would be for the state of Oklahoma. So anyway, with that being said, got to have my unofficial commercial, unpaid commercial for Zevia, my favorite drink of choice besides water. And let's see. Okay, so let me double check here. I'm going to scroll down. If you guys can give me a thumbs up to just let me know that you can hear me okay and everything. I see you're all saying hello to each other. And we always have some sort of technical glitch or issue. So I just want to make sure before I start rolling into some of the questions that people were, let's see. Oh, Danny's thoughts, we could talk about that too in just a minute, but and I don't I'm not cool enough to know what all the codes and lingo are, and you have a whole bunch of ones. I have a feeling you're giving me an answer to my question, but I don't know what that answer is. So, well, you guys must be able to hear me if you heard me talking about paying dues. So I was just looking for somebody to give me the thumbs up that my audio is 100% good. You guys can hear me, and I can go ahead and start answering some questions. But because once I get rolling, man, okay, thank you, Jay Curvitt. So, All right. Thank you. Thank you, Danny's thoughts. All right. All right. So once I start rolling, I have the questions in front of me, which I have to scroll way back up to 20 minutes ago where the first questions were posted. And so I won't be able to simultaneously see new comments that are coming in. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave the, actually, let's see. Hold on a second. Darn, I don't have, I gotta make something else where I want the chat to be on the screen, but okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Oh, our chat isn't showing. I told you there's always a technical difficulty. This sucks. Oh, awesome. It's not showing on any of our options. That's fantastic. Okay, well, see, my instincts were right. Something technical was happening, but we're just gonna leave it on this, I guess. Live call-in show. And what I was going to do was set it on the screen that said that we had a caller on the line right now, because although there is no caller on the line just yet, I wanted to start answering some of the questions that were posted 20 minutes ago, and in order to make sure I fully answer those before we jump into new or different questions, I just wanted to not have the the call-in number on the screen first. So I feel like I'm going to start hiccuping. So anyway, so let me see. I really don't want to. Okay, let me see if there's anything that's super quick. Yeah, I'm having issues. Okay, you can hear. Okay. All right, awesome. Now I'm starting to get some, I don't know if there's a huge delay or what, because all of a sudden a whole bunch of you guys are like, yeah, you can hear me. And you guys are usually much quicker about answering me back on questions. But anyway, so take a look at the post or whatever, comment, whatever you call it in the live chat, at 12:05 by Lori. She put on there, if you have questions for Catherine, please be sure to put them, put them like this, type them like this. And then she put the format. John Q. Public, if that's you, yep, it looks like it's probably you. So okay, I don't know if we're going to have luck today on that, but at least I know what your questions are, and you asked them early enough since they are really open-ended questions that might take us some time. So I didn't try to not answer, but let me just finish this. Put the questions in the format, excuse me, that Lori put them in there so it's easy for me to see. I have a feeling today we have enough content so far with questions that were posted before we actually went live. We could end up having a full show without any additional questions coming in. And so that's fine. Don't feel like you have to think of questions. You're going to get a lot of information today just with that alone. So, so John Q. Public, if it's okay, what I want to do is, I know what at least 3 of your questions are, I think. I don't remember. I scrolled away from them for this. Oh, all right. We're going to try the phone call. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. It's not on my end, you guys. This is not on my end. There's something on his end that keeps it cutting out. So anyway, excuse me. Are you there now?
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
So what I was going to say to you is that you put questions in there, and
yes.
I was just going to go ahead and start answering the questions first. I was actually going to have you call in after that point to see if if there's more discussion or questions that stem off of that.
Okay.
Since we were having some issues, but you have, let me just give me a second.
Isn't technology great, ma'am?
Oh, it's fantastic. Like, yeah. I love how the live chat is not showing up on the screen today. At least I can see it in my little box, but you guys can't see it on the, in the show part. So, okay. What state license allows the most places to practice law? So what I wanted to do really quick, John Q. Public and others, is I wanted to see if there were any really quick questions that I could answer that would be extremely quick, because the topics that John Q. Public was posting about are going to be a little bit more in depth, and I wanted to give it full discussion. So without, neglecting and having to scroll all the way back to this when we were done with those for those quicker questions. So, DJ Plus 2, you had a question. What state license allows the most places to practice law? I don't know that I understand what your question is. What state license allows the most places to practice law? Yeah, I'm not sure what that question means. I don't know if it's just a miswording of the question or maybe a misunderstanding of how being licensed to practice in a jurisdiction works or something of that nature. Maybe if you could think of how to reword it, even just a little bit, that might help me understand, where our disconnect is so I can answer your question. But just so people know, so the jurisdictions that I'm licensed to practice in, which I should remember all of them, but apparently I was struggling today to list them. So the very first jurisdiction I was licensed to practice in was the state of Minnesota. That's where I was living at the time. And so I had to sit for the bar exam. And I guess just so you guys know, so it's different, obviously, for different professions, what the licensing really entails. And we're going to get into that a little bit with the bigger questions that we're going to start off the show with. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of info in case you are not attorneys, don't know attorneys well enough to know what they went through to get licensed and all that other fun stuff. So there are a few nuances in a few jurisdictions, but what I'm about to say is in general how it goes overall. Okay, so to be an attorney, you have to go to college and get a bachelor's degree, not an associate's. I mean, you can have an associate's, but you have to have a 4-year bachelor's degree. Then you have to go to law school and get a Juris Doctorate degree. So that is another, if you're going full-time, full credits every semester, all the, the whole 9 yards. I even had to take summer and J-term classes, January term, and summer classes as well on top of my full-time schedule. Then, which was so fun as a single mom. But anyway, so that was 3 full years. And if you, in order to sit, so in order to be licensed, you have to, in most states, you have to pass the bar exam. In order to take the bar exam in most states, you have to have a law degree from an ABA, American Bar Association, accredited law school. In order for that, as part of that accreditation, the law school cannot allow you to graduate in sooner than 2.5 years. That is the absolute soonest for a law degree. That's not the lower, the undergrad, the bachelor's or anything. That's just for the law degree. It can take no less than 2.5 years and no more than, I believe it's 4.5 years. That's if you're doing part-time. You could stretch it out to 4.5 years. So between 2.5 years and 4.5 years. And so once you have your law degree, then you have to apply to sit for the bar exam. So that might sound a little weird, but it's not just paying a fee and giving them your information. No, you have to go through character and fitness. You have to go through all kinds of stuff. So I literally, let's see, how old was I? I sat for the Minnesota bar in 2007, and so I would have been 23 at the time, I think. Yeah, so I was 23 when I was applying for all the for the bar exam and all that stuff. And I had to submit FBI fingerprint card. I had to submit my, a criminal background check for each state I had lived in. Now, keep in mind, at that point in my life, I had lived in Michigan full-time only until I was 3 years old. And then I moved to Florida. And then I left Florida when I was 14 years old. And then I moved to Minnesota. So at that point in my life, I had only lived in Minnesota as an adult, no other state did I have residence as an adult. But I had to get my criminal background check from Michigan and Florida, even though in no circumstance ever can a 3-year-old be held criminally responsible. I had to get a criminal background check for Michigan too. And my driver's record, my Secretary of State, whatever, each state kind of has their own thing that they call it, but basically my driver's record in each state. Now keep in mind, I had not been a driver in any state other than Minnesota at that point, but it is what it is. So, so I had to get that. I had to write down, give them not only the address, but the phone number and like the manager or whatever, if it was an apartment or something like that, and the exact dates of every place I had ever lived, ever. Now, my parents got divorced when I was 3, and they both had moved around a lot. So at that point in my life, I had residences in 3 different states, and my mom and dad continued to move, and at different times I lived with each of them. And then when I was in college, I moved a lot, and then I was a single mom. So, I had to go where opportunities were or where my needs could be met for my son, things like that. So anyway, and then I went to law school, so then I had to move again because it was 3 hours away. So anyway, there were a lot of places that sometimes can be extremely hard to think of every single place you've ever lived. And then I had to write down every single job that I ever had, ever had. And I first started working outside of the house at age 11. So, it's, you have to go through all of that. You have to answer a whole battery of questions. You have to, explain away any time that you've ever been in trouble in school, in college or in law school, if you've ever been reprimanded by any kind of government agency ever, basically for anything. It's a whole thing. And so that's the character and fitness portion. And so they determine if you're basically even eligible to take the bar exam. Then is the big day where you get to sit down and take, and it's usually a 2 full day bar exam. Although it is different now than it was then. And even Michigan, I guess, just voted to change how they do the bar exam yet again. So when I took it, it was state specific. So that means I had to know actually what the state statutes were in Michigan about custody and parenting time and, torts and contracts and all kinds of stuff, right? And I think that's the way it should be, but that's the way that it was then, and it's not that way now. There is a uniform bar exam, and so there's a written portion, which is the essay portion, and then there's a multiple choice portion. And then you also have to take an ethics exam, which is a totally different, I want to say that's the, no, it's not the MBE, MPRE, Michigan or Multi-State Professional Responsibility Exam. I don't know if it's still called that, but it was when I was being admitted to practice. So the MPRE, so it's a whole nother exam, hours long, of professional ethics. And so the ABA has their model code of ethics, but then each state has their own code of ethics for attorneys. And so anyway, all of that being said, there's a lot of stages just to be able to be an attorney in a particular jurisdiction. And then so each jurisdiction you want to be admitted in, that is, you do that for each jurisdiction. So I had to do that in Minnesota, and then I had to do that in Michigan. And then it's a different set of things that you have to turn in for the United States Supreme Court and the federal district courts. In fact, in those, you have to have attorneys that are willing to motion the court for your admission. Basically, I want to say it's 2 or 3 attorneys that you have to get that are already admitted to practice in that court, who are willing to say to the court, listen, this attorney would be a benefit. It would be a benefit to this court to have this attorney admitted to practice in this jurisdiction, to be able to take cases in this jurisdiction. And that can be really hard for somebody like me. I was a brand new attorney in Minnesota, and then in Michigan, I moved there and I knew no one. I mean, I was there because of my family, but I didn't know anybody in the court system. I certainly didn't know attorneys. And then when I moved to the west side of the state, once I got married to Mike, and he dragged me over to the side of the state that gets even more snow, then I didn't know people over there. In fact, the one of the people I did end up finding that agreed to sponsor me to get sworn into the west side Western District Court for the Federal District Court in Michigan was actually, I had done a divorce where my client was was living in Midland, which is the east side, and the case we had was in Kent County, which for those of you who don't know is the far west side of Michigan. And so I actually called opposing counsel and I was like, so we've been working on this case for the last year and a half together. I think you know what kind of attorney I am. Would you be willing to sponsor me? And I fully assumed the guy would actually say no, because, divorces get really bad and ugly, and custody gets ugly. And so, but he said yes. So I was really appreciative. And at that point, because you have to also, they have to say to the court how long they have known of you. So he was one of the people that had known me longer at that point with the context that we'd known each other in. So anyway, okay, so all that to kind of explain how you get law licenses and things like that. And maybe that'll help clear up what your question was, DJ Class 2. If not, then, you could clarify for me and we could touch base later. But I think that was, no, really? Oh, sorry. I just, John Q. Public, I just read your update about Whitmer's new appointment. I just can't anymore. I can't do anything about that. So, I'm going to pretend that bad news did not hit me today. Okay, so yep, I think it's just back to, you have another one that was down there that I hadn't seen yet. And you have another one. Dang, you are loading me up today. Okay, so I am back to I think it's your first question. So let me start to, now these are a little bit, yeah, okay, so you kind of have a more broad question about licenses and regulation and plates and things like that, but then you narrow down the question specifically asking about 14th Amendment right to travel. And what was the one that was down here? Okay.
They're all kind of interconnected in a way, though.
Okay, so let me start with the broader question. So those of you who are listening to the show, listening later perhaps on the podcasting platforms or whatnot. So the question he posed the first question was, using the scrutiny standard by Justice Thomas of the text and historical tradition of a constitutional amendment, what are the historical analogs of licenses, registration, plates, and insurance? Oh, wait, that's not the first question, is it? Yeah. Plates and insurance concerning the 14th Amendment right to travel by any manner of conveyance. Okay, so let's break that down. First of all, his question is really, it's not so much a constitutional question as it is a constitutional case precedent question. And so he's talking about the Bruin standard that, what was it, 2023? Might have been 2022.
2022.
So, so June of 2022, a lot has happened in my life in the last 3.5 years. Holy cow. Okay. So, June of 2022, the United States Supreme Court came out with the Bruin case that essentially talked about, okay, well, certain things, if you want to regulate, say, for example, firearms, you have to look at the historical context, the tradition is that something that was historically regulated at the time that the Constitution was put into place, or if it was an amendment, the time the amendment was put into place? So that's the question. Now, I like to beat the dead horse on this one, so to speak. I am not a huge fan of focusing too much thought and resources on making case precedent the center of discussion, the center of, the focal point of what what our rights are and where they come from, and what limitations there are on government, that kind of thing. There is a purpose for case precedent, which cannot be rightfully called case law, but is often called case law. But it is not supposed to, it's not really supposed to be used to interpret the the elements of the Constitution that are pretty damn straightforward. We're supposed to just look at the text of the Constitution. So with that in mind, if we do look at, well, what really happened, what is the historical tradition of having licenses, registration plates, insurance, and things like that. And I just want to take a step back, and I asked Brave Browser, what are the kinds of things that you need licenses or registrations for? Okay, so because I think sometimes we take it for granted. We forget about things. I have another caller calling in. I do. Other caller, I feel like I've seen that phone number before, but other caller that is calling from the 337 area code. Let me, I've already started digging into this question, so let me get this question answered, and then I can, you could call in and we can get your question answered as well. But this is a question that was lingering also. John Q. Public's questions here are lingering from our last show. And by the time he was able to ask them, it was towards the end. And I was like, no, we can't open that Pandora's box at the very end. So, but please, I want to encourage you to listen to this question being answered and then call in when we're done with that. So, okay, so this is what Brave Browser answers. You need licenses and registrations for a wide variety of activities, including operating a business, practicing certain professions, and engaging in regulated industries. Common types include, and then it starts with business operations. A general business license is typically required to operate within a specific jurisdiction, such as a county or municipality. So literally just having a business license. What is that purpose for? That is a good question. And this may be issued as a business privilege license, nice, business tax registration, or basic business license. Additional licenses may be needed for specific activities like selling alcohol, handling controlled substances, or operating a food service business. So again, you might need a general business license plus a liquor license, or plus a food service license or something like that. Then it talks about professional services. Many professions require state-issued licenses to practice legally. Examples are public school teachers, lawyers, plumbers, counselors, barbers, public accountants, financial advisors. Some states also require licensing for interior designers, travel agents, and pest control workers. I'm sorry, I could not say that with a straight face. Wow, interior designers. Okay. Next is going to be coloring with crayons. You have to have a license by Crayola to be able to color with crayons. Okay. I don't mean to, that is not supposed to be a dig on the interior designer profession, but rather, what the hell, government? Why would you have, what danger to society is an interior designer if they are not licensed by the government? Okay. Anyway, federal and state specific activities. So this is, again, the answer of what requires a license. Businesses involved in regulated industries such as agriculture, aviation, broadcasting, firearms, alcohol and tobacco, commercial fishing, maritime transportation, mining, And nuclear energy production may need absolutely do need, according to the federal government anyway, federal licenses or permits. Let's see. And of course, there are all kinds of things with employment and tax compliance. Even home-based businesses may require a home occupation permit, a sign permit, a health department permit if you're serving food, or a fire inspection permit, especially if clients visit the home. And a business license and possibly a sales tax permit are also common. And then, there's different licenses for things like a CDL or operating heavy vehicles, installing electrical systems or alarm systems, performing welding or crane operations. And then there's things like, let's see, contractors, electricians, plumbers, etc. Let's see, what else? Anything else? I think we've talked about environmental and safety permits, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so those are the kinds of things. Now, what I will say is, I'm not saying that, I guess what I want to do is address some common sense things and then get into the historical aspect. So the common sense things, I could see a common sense argument being made for licensing for certain things. So somebody that's going to perform surgery, I could see a common sense argument. Again, I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying I don't, but I could see a common sense argument that you should have some sort of licensing if you're going to be performing surgery on someone. If you are going to be doing electrical work in a public building where people that, and I differentiate, we own our own home. So I'm saying there is a difference between us wanting to hire an electrician and say the city of Ormond Beach or even the Walmart in Ormond Beach hiring an electrician, because in our home, no, it's not open to the public. And the only people who would be impacted by something wrong, it's a single family unit, the only people who would be impacted would be us. But in a building that is open to the public, then you have other people necessarily impacted. If there's some sort of electrical, issue that leads to fire or some other catastrophic event, you have a lot of people that would be impacted by that. And so, again, I'm just saying I see a common sense argument for commercial, properties or things that are otherwise open to, even apartment buildings. I could see an argument there where it's not somebody that's just the owner and only the owner is being impacted, right? Or, the owner's family. What other things did they list here? I'm skipping most of them because I don't see. Okay, maybe pest control workers. I could see a common sense constitutional argument that if you have chemicals that you are going to be dispersing, that you have to have some sort of proper training and licensing. And it's really not about the licensing. It's about requiring proper training. Same with the electrician. That you need proper training to be able to know, what chemicals you should be using and how you use them. And how do you not have those impact a neighboring property? And, if you are, and I'm even thinking of a broader impact of pest control of, animals or basically, rodents or things of that nature, something, are you capturing them or doing something in a certain way that is not going to actually force them onto a neighboring property? I don't know if you guys are catching the common theme here, but the ability of someone to utilize their own liberties without, so long as they're not interfering with the liberties of someone else. Okay, that's basically the common theme here. Agriculture, again, the only aspects would be in terms that I would think would be in terms of, if you are utilizing chemicals outside, how are you using those chemicals? If you're just using fertilizer, I don't think that should be regulated. If you're, if you're, you have a plane or some sort of elevated thing where you are spraying chemicals down onto your property that with the right wind or, with different rain patterns or something is going to impact neighboring properties, I think that's a consideration. Aviation, I will say I think there's a little bit more with aviation because you can't have some dumbass in a plane up there. Obviously you can have accidents with cars too, don't get me wrong. And so we're going to start circling back towards what John Q. Public's specific underlying question is. But with aviation, it's even more so that if something goes wrong, you can't just, with a car, if it just stops, right? It stops where it is. If it runs out of gas, okay, it runs out of gas, it's there. It's not necessarily a crash or imminent danger just by running out of gas. If a plane runs out of fuel, that's imminent danger. It's imminent danger for the people on board. It's imminent danger for everyone below. So there is a heightened, that's kind of a pun, isn't it? Talking about aviation, but a heightened level of issue or impact to other people's rights when you're talking about aviation. Broadcasting, I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around what kind of danger could occur from broadcasting that would require federal government involvement. And so with that being said, I'm going to touch base on the alcohol. Selling alcohol. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a mom and I have an alcoholic in my family too, alcoholics in my family. And so I don't know. I see as a mom, I'm not saying this as a constitutional attorney, as a mom, I see the reason for needing to have laws about that you can't sell alcohol to minors. I don't know that necessarily translates to licensing. So if I purchased, for whatever reason, it was a really good deal. I'm just an entrepreneur. I've decided to become an entrepreneur. And besides, owning my own law firm and all that, but I decided to start buying up stuff that's just at good prices and turning around and selling it at a profit of all kinds of things. And I happened to go to Sam's Club and they just had a whole bunch of a particular kind of alcohol that was on sale. I'll just say, I'm not a drinker, so I don't really know what's out there. So I'm just going to say Mike's Hard Lemonade because I drank that in college. So Mike's Hard Lemonade, they just had a whole bunch of them and they were just at such a steal of a deal. They were $1 a bottle. And I thought, dang, even if I sold them at $2 a bottle, I'd be making money. And it would be a deal for the people that want them. I'd put them on ice and I'm a block from A1A. So during all the parades, all the events, Jeep Week, Bike Week, you name it, I'll be able to make money. I don't see a reason why I should have to have a license to sell that alcohol. I'm not sure that there's some sort of overriding government interest in that. I don't really think there is. Food. Well, we don't want food poisoning, but I'll tell you what, I honestly don't know, how does that really work? When you see at a gas station a pop-up food truck or, somebody's doing barbecue in Florida, it happens a lot more than in Michigan, for example, but where, it's just like an empty parking lot and there's some guy doing some barbecuing. I'm a little hesitant to go to something that looks a little sketchy, but, I'm going to use my own discernment And quite frankly, no amount of government permitting is going to make me feel better about whether that food is too sketchy for me to eat. There's there's an interesting part of town near in Daytona, near Nova and International Speedway Boulevard, which is the road where International Speedway racetrack is, Daytona International Speedway. And anyway, so it's not too far from there. And this neighborhood has a strip mall. So in the strip mall, there are a bunch of things. There's a way at the one end, there's a Crunch Fitness, and then there's a mattress store. There's a Dollar Tree. There's one of those Amazon return places where you can buy stuff in bins and it's a different dollar amount. It's a different day of the week. There's, all kinds of, I don't know. I'm just going to say bargain or low income types of places, which, there's a secondhand, like a thrift store, consignment store. There's a consignment store there. There's a sushi restaurant. And overall, if you look at the buildings, if you look at the neighborhood, I go there and I shop. And there's some places in the neighborhood where I would gladly purchase items from, and there's some places I would gladly purchase food from. But uncooked fish in this kind of a neighborhood, and where it's not really that close to the water. I mean, maybe if it was on water's edge, at the beach, I'd be a little less skeptical, but I'm sorry. A sushi restaurant, especially one that looks that budget, they probably have full licensing. To me, it screams, I'm going to die of food poisoning. I should have my will and all my affairs in order before I go there. And the mattress store that's in there, don't know why, gives me the willies. I'm thinking just the setup of this particular strip mall. And I am the person that will gladly pick up stuff off the side of the road that's free if it's a good deal and I think I can clean it up and it's got to be plastic or copper or something that I can really clean a lot. But solid wood, something of that. I have gotten tons of stuff off the side of the road since we've moved here to Florida. So I'm not above that. And Goodwill Outlet in Grand Rapids is one of my favorite stores of all time. So, and that's where Goodwill puts its unwanted items. Okay. It's the thrift store of thrift stores. So my point being, it's not that I think I'm just too good for this stuff, but buying a mattress from that particular location sketches me out. I'm thinking, no, that's not going to be clean. Can't do it. So again, do they have their business license? I'm sure they do. Does that make me feel any better about it? No. And quite frankly, it shouldn't. So anyway, other licenses, public school teachers or any teachers, do they need to be licensed? What exactly is the license for? I would say there's a common sense argument to saying, in order to be a teacher, you have to have, maybe, how would you say this? You have to have at least the level of certification. So if you want to be a college professor teaching undergrad students who are going for their bachelor's degrees, you have to have at least a bachelor's or maybe even say a master's or a doctorate or a PhD of something like that. I could see a common sense argument. You can't have somebody that never went to high school or graduated from high school teaching at the college level and have it really be impactful. I would argue there's a common sense argument. Not that it could never happen, but there's some common sense to that. Is it enough to have the government get involved? I don't think so. Now, if you're talking about under 18 kids going to elementary school, middle school, high school, I think there's a significant argument to make that, especially where there are compulsory education laws and you have to send your kids to school, then yeah, you should probably ensure that, teachers have at least a bachelor's education. I would think. and maybe have passed some sort of a test. Maybe depends. I don't know what the bachelor's program looks like for education. That was not my major. I do have a child who is a second grade teacher. So I guess I could ask her a little bit about that. But there's some common sense arguments. But as far as licensing itself, I don't know about that. Because what all would go into that? What are the components of licensing for a teacher? I would think, the questions are, do you have the relevant education? First of all, for your subject area. If you want to be a math teacher, do you know how to do 2 + 2? Do you know the subject matter? And then also, do you know, as a teacher, do you know concepts of conflict management? Do you know how to manage a room? If you're supposed to teach a room that has 20 students, do you know how to deal with 20 students at a time? Do you know how to deal with, I'm not saying to implement all kinds of social emotional programs and all that kind of stuff, but do you know how to deal with students where they're at when they come into the classroom? If a student has just dealt with a tragedy in their family, just lost a parent, or maybe they are a new student and they're trying to hide the fact that they don't know how to read, or whatever the case is. Do you know how to deal with students as human beings? There's some sort of element to that, but I think there's, it's not necessarily about licensing. And then, can you pass a criminal background check? Obviously, I would think everyone, even in this chat, would agree that you don't want people to work in the school settings who've been convicted of, sex crimes or crimes against children or murder or, something, heinous. I would, child trafficking, anything like that. I would think that we would all agree with that. So anyway, there's some common sense, right, to some of those things. And I promise you, this all relates to the underlying question that's very specific about driving and traveling and all of that stuff. But, and I've talked about before, do I think lawyers should be licensed? Absolutely not. Do I think plumbers need to be licensed? Counselors, barbers, accountants, financial advisors, travel. I can't even bring the travel agents in just yet. No, I don't think any of those things should be licensed. I don't think it's an appropriate function of government to deal with licensing of those kinds of professions. And I don't think it's a proper function of government to really regulate those professions largely anyway. I think there's a caveat emptor, buyer beware. If I'm looking for an attorney, I don't trust any other attorneys really, but if I'm looking for an attorney and let's say I'm going through a divorce, let's say I'm not me, okay? I'm an elementary school teacher. And unfortunately, my husband cheated on me and I need to get, and he's, doing all kinds of other bad things and I need to get a divorce to protect me and my kids. I'm going to look for an attorney who, any attorney who's admitted in the state can practice anything. So except for a few nuanced things, intellectual property or, whatever, those kinds of things. But generally speaking, I could go, as an attorney, you could go all the way through law school, never focusing anything on family law, not paying any attention to any statutes about family law, never reading a family law case, but you could legally take on a family law case. Now, there's some ethical considerations where you'd have to tell your client that, you're not very well versed and, what some of the limitations are and things like that. But there's really not a law that stops you. You are legally permitted to take on that case. So with that being said, I don't think that's, really a whole lot different than a situation where someone who, reads a lot of cases, reads all the statutes, maybe goes to court for hobbies and sits in the back of a circuit court and watches divorce proceedings in that county take place once a week. Somebody who is engaged, but not an attorney. I don't think there's a reason why you can't hire that person to help you over the person who's licensed but has no idea how divorces go. I don't think there's a public interest in that. I certainly don't think it's a role of government to be involved in that. Plumbers, counselors, again, it's caveat emptor. You probably want to make sure somebody knows what they're doing. So we know of a plumber down here in Florida that we met when we first moved down here, and I don't know if he has any licenses whatsoever. I couldn't care less because I know that guy knows what he's doing. I've been to his shop, I've been to his house, I've talked with him a whole lot about different projects, I've seen him in action. He knows what he's doing, and I think he's like in his 80s. He's been doing this a long time. I couldn't care less if he's licensed. And I've seen plumbers that are licensed that clearly are dumber than a box of rocks and don't know anything about common sense application to plumbing or gravity or things that might be relevant to doing plumbing work in your house. My point is, none of those professions is there a public need to have the government involved with. Certainly interior designers and travel agents. Really? What is the government thinking they're protecting the public from by regulating the design industry? Well, if you don't know the right purples to match with the right yellows, then, your whole feng shui is going to be off. Whatever. I don't even know. I can't even. So there are certain things. I could see a common sense argument about firearms, getting at one of those things, one of those topics. I could see a common sense argument being made about firearms that you not about who is able to produce them or work on them or sell them, but really, what kinds of things, the mechanics, because firearms involve explosives, right? They involve things that can go wrong. They involve an inherent risk of harm. So I see a common sense argument for education, training, and the more you are involved with firearms, the more training would be necessary. So if you want to use a firearm, I think even just using a firearm, you should be obviously educated on how they work and the basic functions and how to clean them and things like that. But if you want to make firearms and sell firearms, I think the more aspects of the firearm that you want to be involved with, I think the more education that you should have to have, because that is something, if you're an idiot and you don't know anything about firearm safety and you want to sell firearms, for example, to someone, and you want to show someone, hey, look at this gun, isn't it cool? And you want to show how awesome it sounds when it fires that round, and you point it in the direction of another human being. Granted, it might be that somebody's totally outside of your store. They're just on the sidewalk, but you're such a dumbass and you don't know anything about firearm safety that the number one rule, you don't ever point a gun at someone unless you intend to aim there. There's, you know what I mean? There's some common sense things that I think would be arguments for education in certain aspects of it. But to have the level of regulation about, open carry versus concealed carry, and those kinds of things, they both can't be right. So if you have, for example, I just went to a ladies learn to shoot class. Now I already had my CPL up in Michigan and all that, but I'm just not as comfortable with firearms personally as I would like to be. So, and a friend of mine invited me to go. So I went with her to a ladies learn to shoot class, and it's actually at a place that does it with it's like virtual training. So there's no live rounds in this place. And anyway, so I was talking with one of the instructors there as I actually did really well. Like I was shocked because I picked up a firearm once in August this year, and it had been at least 2 years before that since I had picked up a firearm, and then 2 years before that one time. So I mean, all of 2-3 times in the last 4 or 5 years. So I did really well aiming wise, and the proper whatever format of holding the gun and all the things that they were training us on. And somehow we got to talking about open carry and concealed carry, and he's talking about open carrying, and then there's concerns about that. And I said, well, because down here in Florida, in Michigan, for those of you who are not in either state, in Michigan, and they change things every 5 minutes, so perhaps it's been changed again. But anyway, you can open carry your firearm in Michigan without a permit, but you cannot concealed carry in Michigan without a permit. In Florida, the law says you cannot open carry at all, but you can concealed carry with a permit. Now, a year ago, 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, the law changed. I'll just say a year and a half ago, the law changed in Florida so that you can concealed carry without a permit as long as you are legally able to get a permit. Stupid. But anyway, they're saying as long as there's not one of those conditions that would otherwise prohibit you from getting a permit, you are allowed to concealed carry without a permit. But you still can't open carry, what the law says. However, somebody down in the southern part of the state went all the way to our court. I think it was the 2nd District Court of Appeals, and they won a case saying that that part of the law is unconstitutional. And so, in other words, you can open carry in the state of Florida. That the Constitution requires you to be able to open carry. So then you had a bunch of sheriffs, not enough, because it certainly wasn't all of them, but you had a bunch of sheriffs around the state that were issuing these press releases that they understand the case is still, potentially not final, and it might make its way to the Florida Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court or whatever. But as of now, they're recognizing that the law of the land in Florida is that you can open carry here in the state of Florida. So anyway, I was talking with this instructor, and that court case just happened. I think it was September 10th. I think it was the day Charlie Kirk was shot. So some press releases done by the sheriffs were actually done as a joint, acknowledgement of what happened to Charlie Kirk, and then paired with, hey, in Florida, the law is now this. Okay. So anyway, back to the shooting range. I was talking with this instructor about open carry, and he was saying something about it's just a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. It's, you can't do that. And I said, well, except for, I'm a constitutional attorney. And finally, a court down here acknowledged, yeah, you can open carry. So, I mean, if a sheriff or a police officer wants to give me shit about it, bring it. And so I said, that's not the thing that's stopping me from open carrying down here. And he's like, yeah, but it's just really dumb. I mean, you don't have open carry. You just can't open carry. That's why it's just not safe. It's not, there's all these things he was talking about. He said, you just don't see, retired or off-duty police personnel or military open carrying firearms. And I said, have you ever been to Michigan? Because yeah, you do. You see it all over the place. And in other states where you already were acknowledged to have the right to open carry firearms, I said, you see all kinds of people open carrying, including especially off-duty police officers or retired military personnel or whatever. They don't hesitate to open carry. His whole argument is that it would draw the bad guys to you, and it would be all about how quickly they could disarm you and take your firearm from you. So anyway, I have no idea where I was going with that, other than there's considerations about firearms to keep in place or, to be thinking about. That does not need, common sense reasons for having some sort of law or regulation does not necessarily mean it's constitutional. And even if it is constitutional, having a law that says you shouldn't do this or you should do this, like you should be educated in firearm safety before going to shoot or something of that nature. That does not mean or equate to some sort of license, because you shouldn't have to pay a fee for anything. And you shouldn't have to register with the government for anything. Now, if they want to say that you are not safe to do something, then, like if I wanted to hire an electrician, and I wanted to make sure it was somebody who was licensed, I would think the easiest way would be to say, hey, can you give me your, whatever, the licensing mechanism is, can you give me the number? It's like a serial number or something from the license that I could look it up in some state database, or can you show me a copy of the license or something of that nature? Dang, I drank that quick today. So anyway, that's what some of the considerations are. So that brings us to traveling and the questions that are with that. Oh, it got scrolled. So talking about licenses, which we just did in general. So I didn't actually touch on driver's licenses yet, but that's another thing that's why I was hoping the AI would just give me a whole list of things. But that was a list of other things, professions and things like that. So driver's licenses in general. Does having a driver's license mean that you're a good driver? John, what would you say to that?
No. And that was the whole point.
Does having a driver's license mean that you're a safe driver and pose no risk to anyone else on the road?
No, it does not. It's just another form of taxation. It's another form of control and power by the government, and that's all it is.
So does having insurance mean that you are a safe driver and pose no risk to anyone on the road?
No, and especially here in Michigan. And the other individual that may have caused it, or you may have caused it, is responsible for their own damages that you may have or may not have caused, which is also unfair.
Okay, hold on a second. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, because I just got a notification that the mic and something wasn't working quite right. So hopefully.
Yeah, it went quiet for a moment, but yes, I'm here.
Okay. So the three states that I've lived in, Michigan, Minnesota, and Florida, all are no-fault insurance states. So right before we moved down to Florida from Michigan, it was, I believe it was February. Actually, I think it was February 11th, 2021. We were driving on one of the fairly common roads in West Michigan area, nearing a bridge, actually. And it was a very, very snowy day, lots of snow on the road. And I had a all-wheel drive, Kia Sportage, small SUV that's low to the ground, wide wheelbase, respectively, and very safe for those kinds of road conditions. Well, there was a young driver who came up behind me, and Mike was driving my car. And there's a young driver that came up behind us and hit my car, and it caused a lot of damage. And so we pulled off to the side of the road and, had to exchange information. Of course, the kid did not have his car registered. He said he had just bought it and had to go register it. He had no insurance on it. And Mike didn't really believe me about the way that it worked. And so we ended up having to eat the huge deductible that we had, because we should have otherwise gotten him to pay for our deductible or filed what's called a mini tort case in small claims to make him pay for that deductible. But Mike didn't believe me. He thought insurance was going to handle it and that was a done deal and whatever. And nope. So anyway, it kind of helped us having insurance, but he didn't have insurance on the vehicle. And even if there was some sort of punishment to him, which I don't think there was, but even if there was some sort of punishment to him, it didn't help me. There was no court order as part of the punishment that he had to pay me for the damages that I sustained. So, I mean, my car was in the shop for a long time getting fixed. So there's, anyway, all that to say, insurance, I don't think any kind of insurance should be required. Mike just told me today, this is I realize a different world or a different level of conversation, but Mike just told me today that, so his company just got bought out this last summer. And so half a year ago, like 6 months ago, they got bought out, and mid-year they switched us. So August 1st, we had to switch to new insurance. And I don't remember exactly what we were paying, but our premium, it ended up being $6,000 more than what we were paying already for the annual premiums. So much so more that we couldn't afford to keep Emma on our insurance, so she doesn't have insurance. Mike, I'm on the insurance. I have cancer, so we kind of figured I should probably stay on the insurance. And I can't be on the insurance without Mike, so because it's his insurance. So the two of us are on insurance, and not Emma. And then today he finally got information. Of course, they do this so that you only have very few days, less than a week left before the ACA applications and all that close and all that stuff. But so they tell him today that our premiums are going up. So now it would be, I haven't done the full math, but it would probably be another $2,500 a year to have, maybe $2,000 a year. I don't know. I'm just going to say $2,000 a year more to have Emma on a plan with us. But it would be, say another $1,200 a year for us to be, just for me and Mike to remain on a plan and Emma to not have insurance. So, and the premium, so that's just the premium. The deductibles are stupid high. I want to say it was like $10,000. So it is not going to do me any good unless we have, at least $20,000 in medical bills in one foul swoop, in one calendar year, and then it'll help somewhat. But we can't even afford to pay up to that point to get us that far. I shouldn't be required to have that insurance. It doesn't do me any good. So, and then we're paying, at this point it's going to be, I don't even know. I'm just going to say $8,000 annual premium for literally getting nothing because we can't even afford the deductible to go and utilize those services. So that's, insurance is it, homeowners insurance, all of it is, yeah, I think there needs to be laws actually prohibiting the requirement of insurance through those methods, as long as maybe you have some sort of HSA account, so to speak. If you have a set aside account where, money is going in and that's going to be where you take your medical expenses out of, and then have a different one that's set up for homeowners insurance purposes. And then if you want, but the car insurance thing, I don't think is, I don't think you should have to have car insurance. I think that's a choice between you and maybe your lender, right? If somebody is giving you money and they have a collateral, interest in the car, it makes sense that they would want you to have to insure it, but that's a different issue. So with that being said, as far as I'm trying to address some of it was a big question. This is why I couldn't address this at the last show, but so licenses, insurance. Now, as far as registration and plates, and I'm not even talking about, you guys probably have noticed, but I haven't even addressed the historical concept of that, because I'm just talking about the common sense application in with the context of the Constitution, filtering through the lens of the Constitution. Is there still some sort of common sense application here involved? And as far as registering vehicles and having license plates and all of that, I think there's a benefit, but I think it's something that is more of the kind of like the caveat emptor, buyer beware situation, that there's a benefit if you go to somebody that has specialized training. Oh, I was talking about the divorce example as an attorney. It's not required to have any kind of specialized family law training, but if I was going through a divorce, and I was not already an attorney, I would want an attorney who had certifications in all kinds of specialized continuing legal education specifically for family law matters. That's what I would prefer as a purchaser, as a consumer. That's what I would want. So when it comes to registration and plates, the reason why I say that that's similar to that situation is because I could see a reason for registering your vehicles, trailers, boats, something like that, if there's a high risk of theft, perhaps. So if you have, basically, it's like preempting some of the paperwork. It's a way to preempt paperwork if there's an issue with theft or ownership interests or anything like that. So if there's a way, so it's kind of, it could also serve a purpose such as with deeds. So there's different kinds of deeds, but generally speaking, whoever records their deed first to a property, that deed is going to control the ownership of the property. So if I have an interest in my home, and then I write a quitclaim deed to my son, and then I write a quitclaim deed to my daughter, and each one purports to give them the full interest in the home. If my son, even though I may deed it to him first, if he decides to never record it, just shove it in a drawer and whatever, but my daughter is prudent and she decides to go down to the Register of Deeds or whatever it's called in your jurisdiction, she goes down there and she registers and files that deed, then there's record notice of that, of that transaction. So there's other issues. That's kind of a bad example, but at that point, there's other issues. And so if somebody else wants to go to purchase the house from my son, if they're smart, they're going to look up the ownership history in the Register of Deeds, and they're going to see, oh, but there's an Emma that owns this property, not Alex. And so they this new buyer would have no legal recourse, no option to be able to change ownership by purchasing their interest from Alex if he didn't even record his interest and Emma did. So anyway, I could see with a vehicle there being something similar to that, where a registration, I don't know so much about license plates, but where if you register a vehicle or something that's more easily movable, if there's a database like there is for real property, that having a database for personal property could help, actually same thing with firearms for that matter. If there's just one centralized personal property database where you could put in the serial number and have it registered to that owner, you show proof of whatever, purchase, transfer, whatever, however you legally acquired that property and have it registered, then that can help to solve ownership issues later on. I don't think it should be required though. So first of all, I'm going to pause on that point because I have, at least one more aspect before I fully get into answering, the full aspects of your question. But so John, what do you think about, does that make sense, what I'm saying about how there could be benefit to some sort of optional registration versus
Sure.
mandatory?
And yeah, but from what you're saying here, and I get exactly what you're saying, this is all revolving around public safety concerns, licensing, registration, plates, and insurance. The argument has always been used about, well, it's in the interest of public safety. Well, the new scrutiny standards that Justice Thomas had indicated is we're not going to allow the notion of public safety demean and prevent the exercise of a constitutional right. And that's where it started with Second Amendment. And I'm applying that same scrutiny standard to the 14th Amendment of, okay, if we have a right to travel by any manner of conveyance, and then there were no historical analogs prior to 1868, that prevented such conduct, why do we have those laws, rules, and regulations now about licensing, registration, insurance, and plates that were not prohibited prior to 1868, but now they are? And that's during the time when people rode horses, they had horse and buggies, they had stagecoaches, steam engines. I don't know if we had planes at that time, but any manner of travel that we had prior to 1868, which we did have automobiles. Automobiles were around prior to 1868, and there was no driver's licenses, insurance, plates, or registration done.
So interesting. I was kind of waiting to address this aspect of it, but you are right. I wasn't making the argument about registration and things like that being related to public safety at all. I was saying it's an element of convenience to help property disputes, essentially. But I don't think there's any element to safety. But you do bring up an argument that one of the things that they have talked about before is the whole concept of, a lot of laws, a lot of regulations, especially for licensings and registrations and things like that. They talk about one of three things. And this is at state court cases. This is in U.S. Supreme Court cases. They talk about health, safety, and welfare, right? Three things: public health, safety, and welfare. So I just want to point out, and this is something I've done, I did it a lot in 2020 in videos, but it's been a while since I've done this. And I will say I might have a slight misquoting here, because I know the thing that someone else actually typed what I had handwritten in a video on a whiteboard. And I remember there being one typo somewhere in here, and I don't remember what it was about. So hopefully it doesn't impact our discussion here today. But so health, the United States Constitution, the word health appears 0 times. 0. So I think that's a really important aspect, because if the word health appears 0, that means there is 0 authority in the Constitution for the government to do anything related to our health or for the purposes of our health. Now, in state constitutions, there are some, variations to that. For example, in Michigan, I think the word health appears 4 times in the Constitution, in the state constitution, but it's really only in 3 different contexts. 2 of them are together. The contexts are about natural resources, about owning property, specific property, and making laws suitable. Really not in the context of, certainly nothing we're talking about today. And let's see. Well, I will say the natural resources one, as far as that goes, that kind of goes back to what I was first saying with the commonality, that thread, is that you with any of these topics, when I talked about, I could see a common sense argument for having some sort of licensing or regulation or education element to certain professions, for example. That common thread was my ability to exercise my liberties, my freedom, so long as it's not impacting the ability of somebody else to exercise their rights. And so natural resources that is something that there's an interplay, there's an interchange between my ability to exercise my rights and your ability to exercise your rights, because, let's just try to keep a super simple example, but let's say there's a state park or a city park, and you want to go there, and, you want to have a fire. So you want to chop down some trees to use for the fire. But I want to go there to be able to climb the trees, or I want to be able to observe the birds and the wildlife that live in those trees. Or, I just like breathing all that extra fresh air that comes from having those trees. Your interests and my interests are at odds there. And if you are acting upon your interests, that is you know, in theory, let's say there's not like an infinite number of trees in this little park, it's directly impeding my ability to exercise my interests and my freedom as it relates to that property. So I realize that's not necessarily the best analogy to spread across all kinds of different contexts, but my point is to say natural resources is at least an area where I could see a concept of how exercising your rights can impact the rights of others. So then you have the other two aspects, though, welfare and safety. The U.S. Constitution has the word welfare only 2 times: to promote and to pay for. And I want to say promote. I used to have all this so memorized, like it was just off the top of my head. But I want to say, yes, there it is. So the first time the word welfare is used in the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is in the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. So even if you want to say the preamble is some sort of precursor to providing government authority, the only thing that the government has the authority to do from that wording is to promote the general welfare, not to mandate against people. Promoting is kind of like commercial, informing, passing along information. That's all that it is. It's not mandates and requirements and, being strapped down with licenses and fees and taxes and all the rest. The second place that it is, the only other place that the word welfare is mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, is talking about paying for. And dang, I don't remember where it is in the Constitution now. That one is, I want to say it's in the first, it's in Article 1 about legislative powers. Maybe somebody will have it in the chat, and then I'm not even looking in the chat to see. But at any rate, well, let me scroll real quick to see if somebody found it. And then, nope. Nobody? Come on, guys. Okay, so anyway, it's about paying for things. I want to say it's something to do, with expenditures, but it's not mandates. It's paying for things that provide for the general welfare of people. Now, again, I'm only talking about one state constitution at a time, but Michigan, in the state constitution, public welfare is only mentioned 3 times. And so it's talking about atomic energy, which, quite frankly, depending on what we're talking about there, definitely has a significant chance of impacting. If I utilize anything with atomic energy, it can impact the rights of other people and their ability to use their property. You skipped that class. I don't know. You guys are obviously talking to each other. Natural resources, again, that makes sense. We talked about that already. And then another aspect, I don't remember, again, where this is in the Constitution, but the third part where the word welfare is talked about in the Michigan Constitution is where it's talking about having rules and things in place where it's important for the public welfare, but it's not talking about requirements. There's no requirements for the public welfare. So anyway, okay. Safety. So that's the last one. That's the one that in theory is going to be the clincher, right? Where we're going to be able to say, gosh, your questions today all about, licensing and registration, insurance, and the right to travel. It's all about safety. Well, the word safety appears generally more in state constitutions than it does in the U.S. Constitution. Certainly, it appears in 6 places in the Michigan state constitution, but really it's only 3 three different places. It's just mentioned, the same word is mentioned twice in each of three different places. And it's talking about the right of habeas corpus, which I'm going to talk about in a minute in relation to the US Constitution. Again, natural resources, and then the ability to own property. And that the health and safety aspect is basically about the ability to own property for purposes of the government for the benefit of public health and safety. So, in other words, to have public hospitals or fire departments, police, that kind of thing. So that's what it's talking about in that part of the state constitution. So to the U.S. Constitution, though, the word safety appears. John Q. Public, do you happen to know off the top of your head how many times does the word safety appear in the U.S. Constitution?
I don't believe it does.
Close. It's only once. It does appear, but it's only once. And oh gosh, where is it? I can tell you what it's about.
I know we have a right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, but it's not guaranteed to us.
Oh, that is correct. But the word safety does appear once. I should have had it open so I could do Control F, and this would have been so much quicker. But I'll just tell you that the only time the word safety is mentioned in the U.S. Constitution is regarding a writ of habeas corpus, that the right to seek a writ of habeas corpus may only be suspended if the public safety should so require, I think is the wording, or something very close to that. That is, if it's times of emergency or something of that where they need to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. That's it. Habeas corpus has nothing to do with driving, has nothing to do with traveling, it has nothing to do with firearms, it has nothing to do with accountants or CPAs or teachers or firefighters or food trucks. I'm just trying to think of what all the different aspects are that we had. Excuse me. Selling alcohol or having a general business license, or barbers or counselors, plumbers, interior designers, pest control workers, all that. Nowhere does it say anything about the word safety in any of those contexts. So, with that being said, to me, I don't know what the historical context was at the time that the 14th Amendment was written. What was in place in terms of any laws on the books, or how common they were when it comes to requiring vehicles to be registered or licensed, or having driver's licenses or registrations of it. I don't know what any of the historical context is. For me, quite frankly, I don't care. And even more so, I disagree that there'd be a right to travel in the 14th Amendment. I don't think that's what the purpose of the court is. Dumber than a box of rocks in so many ways. And I don't mean this current court and this current court alone. I just mean the U.S. Supreme Court from start to the current has been dumber than a box of rocks when they try to squeeze in all these rights into certain areas to fit a certain political agenda. And I don't think, in the vast majority of cases, I don't think they belong in the 14th Amendment, because that's not the only part that talks about rights of the 14th Amendment. We need to look at. Okay, so the 14th Amendment has 5 sections, but Section 2 is about representatives. Section 3 is about, different officers of the United States. Section 4 is about public debt. Section 5 is about enforcing the provisions of the article. So, I guess that kind of is relevant, but not really. It doesn't have any its own inherent aspects of talking about, rights. So we're really only looking at Section 1, which is one of the smaller aspects of the 14th Amendment, or one of the smaller sections. And it's all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states in the state wherein they reside. And this is the part that your question comes into play, where the courts have talked about a right to travel. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So due process, equal protection, and abridging the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. Those are the three aspects that are relevant to the concept of laws. Nothing in there specifically is delineating any certain kind of rights. So other than, a right to due process and a right to equal protection, but that's not the substantive aspect. That's just talking about how they go about regulating or punishing or enforcing some kind of government thing. It's about the how. It's not about the what. What I'm saying is that the what that you're talking about, especially in these situations here, of course, my credit union is finally calling me back. That's fantastic. And they're in Michigan, so I can't just stop in and talk to them. So my, what I'm saying is that with your question and the rights that you're getting to, and a lot of the other rights they have read into the 14th Amendment don't belong anywhere in the 14th Amendment analysis unless we're talking about the how of their being implemented, protected, or violated. What we need to look at most likely is the 9th Amendment. And so there is a different time period there involved, but obviously then we're talking about, so the 14th Amendment was ratified July 9th. So many good things happen in July. July 9th of 1868, whereas the first 10 amendments were ratified 1791. So we're talking about, I can't do the math. I'm just going to say closer to 100 years later, 75 years later, 9 plus 68, I guess that's 77 years later. There, probably closer to saying 77 years later. 77 years later, in an era where technology and things are changing, and so you have more and more government regulation developing in that period of time. So in terms of looking at the historical traditions in place at the time that that constitutional amendment was enacted, I would fervently argue that we have a displaced reliance upon looking at the 14th Amendment for any of that stuff. A right to travel does not exist or rest solely in the 14th Amendment. That's more about the how. All three aspects of rights are in the 14th Amendment. There are talking about the how. The where, or the what, I should say, the what is in the 9th Amendment for the right to travel, because your right to travel is something that it's literally inherent in the liberty aspect, that you have the right, just like you have the right to breathe frickin' fresh air without a mask on. That's a liberty aspect. That is an essential aspect of God-given existence, that you have the right to travel freely within our country's borders without having some sort of, extra burdens being placed on you. Obviously, you can't just trespass onto somebody else's property, but in terms of, I think there is an aspect of, people talk about there's no need for taxes, we shouldn't ever have any taxes, blah, blah, blah. I think that's bullshit. I think that's ignorant and that's bullshit, because I think we have an absolute inherent need for infrastructure. That is really public defense, public defense. I almost said public safety, but I don't mean it in that context. I mean it in terms of, you know, a national defense. National defense and infrastructure are the two biggest things that the government, it really should be doing, and two of some of the only things that the government should be doing. So you have to have taxes in some mechanism, some form, to be able to provide for those needs. But the ability to have, and in this day and age, I would actually argue, because so many government things and aspects are even required to have internet, I would argue there's a good argument these days that internet, as well as the infrastructure for telephone and water and sewer and roads, you know, the ability of goods and services to move freely from point A to point B across our entire country is a necessary function of government. Not necessarily to regulate it, to overregulate it, but to provide for its existence and its upkeep and things of that nature. So anyway, pairing that though with the Ninth Amendment, that's where our right to the ability to have that freedom to travel would reside. So anyway, all that to say, in the historical context, in 1791, almost to the day, I mean, we have December 15th versus December 9th today, but anyway, were there laws on the books in 1791 about vehicle registrations and having car insurance? No, that I can tell you without pulling open a history book. I can tell you that. I know enough about history to know that. So, but I think it's important that we look at the correct portion of the Constitution for a variety of reasons. But here, for timeline alone, I think it has a different impact based on the court's analysis of what things would be constitutional. So what are your thoughts about that, John Q. Public?
Well, that's what I was getting at, and that's why I made the argument in general speaking, not just with the combat veteran license plate issue, but just licensing in general. And then you get into this argument, well, oh, you're one of these sovereign citizens. No, it's not anything to do with a sovereign citizen. It's look at the facts here. We had the Pony Express, people rode on horses. The Pony Express actually carried armed without having to have any license or anything and on their form of a vehicle. As I said, you had stagecoaches. They had drivers of the stagecoach, which was being paid to take somebody from point A to point B. You had various caravans that moved from the east to the west, and they rode horses, and they had wagon trains and so on and so forth. I'm sure these people got into accidents or into crashes, and they fixed their own vehicle, their own mode of transportation, or they lost their horse, or their horse died or whatever, and they were able to obtain another one. There was no such thing as an insurance policy or registering your horse or putting a license plate on the horse or having to have some kind of government licensing body saying, okay, you're riding this horse correctly, or, you know, you're operating the steam engine correctly, because there were steam engine boats at that time. So any kind of mode of travel that we had at that time, I don't see that there was any, in my research, of any licensing requirement, registration. I think boats and steam engines did start to have registrations just to indicate what country they were from. But other than that, there was no insurance requirement. Although if you were going to travel on a steam engine or, you know, whatever, you might want to get insurance for the loss if the ship sunk. You wanted to get some kind of insurance for your losses if you survived. But nothing about having a plate or registration or licenses. I'm sure a lot of the steam engine captains didn't have a license to operate a ship. Did the driver of the Titanic have a license, and they said, hey, are you able to safely operate this boat here? I don't think that ever came up. So again, I'm not understanding where the whole historical analogs are. If you look at the history of our country, and if you look at the very first automobile that came to America, it was actually done by Mercedes-Benz, and it was done prior to 1868. And that was the very first vehicle that there ever was, before Ford and the Model T and so on and so forth.
Well, so yeah, I mean, exactly. And so, but you understand my one of my reluctancies in relying on the court cases too heavily is you kind of get sucked into their viewpoint and their filter, and then you forget to really take that step back and look at it from just looking through the lens of the Constitution itself as it's stated. Then how can we analyze and how can we look at these issues? And so here, the biggest thing for me is in using the wrong amendment, you're looking at the wrong time frame, even if we want to talk about the historical context and tradition. So anyway,
I was just simply looking at the standard that Justice Thomas came up with, because he is one of the most brilliant justices I've ever seen as a constitutionalist absolutist. And that's exactly what we should have on the Supreme Court, not individuals that are going to adjudicate a case based on feelings and emotions. Because as I said earlier in the chat, when we start to base our laws and adjudicate cases based on feelings and emotions, we are no longer a republic. We become a democracy. And that's a very, very bad road to go down when we start to have judgments and laws based on feelings and emotions.
Well, it makes us more susceptible to the mob rule of a pure democracy. Yeah, that's for sure. So, well, I cannot believe this, but we've spent.
But remember, I'm the dummy who got charged with the crime and got convicted of a crime, but yet, mental common sense and logic doesn't seem to dictate within the Macomb County Circuit Court or with Judge Diana Druzynski. So,
right? Yeah. Well, I see now, because I was doing my best to really address the in thorough form your questions that I wasn't really looking at the chat before, and I see that we have some questions from over an hour ago that I wanted to touch base on. So hopefully we gave all that enough airtime, so to speak, that it was justice to the issues, although obviously they're issues that will come up again in our conversations for sure. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and touch base on some of those other questions.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate the time and the thoroughness, and kind of solidified what I had already thought was the case, but I wanted to impress upon your legal acumen to make sure that what I was thinking here was about the correct lines of thinking here. I will consider the Ninth Amendment, which would be even more strengthening the case about not having licenses, registration, insurance, and plates.
Yeah.
Because that would go from 1791 and not 1868 as what the courts have gone by.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes. Have a great day.
Hope we all learned something today.
Yes, hopefully.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. Okay, so not sure whether I'll put the number on the screen for everyone, but We the People News, who's listed as Tyrant Cam today, if you're still on, I see that you said that you had a question that was that you really needed to call in, and it was too complicated to type, and it's a travesty of justice, etc. So with that being said, if you are still on, Lori, I'm sure, can respond with the phone number. It is 616-303-0093. I didn't really want to put it on the screen for all to call in if nobody's paying attention right now to the words I'm saying. I wanted to give you specifically the chance to call in. I'm not sure if you were the one that tried to call in earlier from that 337 or something phone number. I'm hoping so, because I think that was around the same time. So anyway, I did want to address that. In the meantime, okay, so there is another question that maybe would be a quick one to answer in the meantime while I'm waiting to see if you're going to call in. But the question is, if I could change one thing within the law that I find has interfered with the most number of people, what would that be? Oh my goodness, that is a good question. If I could change one thing in the law that I find has interfered with the most number of people, what would that be? You know, I would be very careful about changing an aspect of the law. And I think what I would do is probably not what your question is getting at. But if I had the ability to change one thing, I would probably, well, you know, let's tie it to my U.S. Supreme Court case right now. And I should probably give you guys the update that the U.S. Supreme Court, because the city of Ormond Beach filed their waiver of response, which I actually have right here, but their waiver of response saying that at this juncture, they don't have an opinion on whether the court should take the case. The case was sent over to the justices, and the justices will have a conference on January 9th to decide whether they want to take the case. And so if you guys can keep this case and me and this whole issue in your prayers, I would appreciate that every day between now and January 9th for sure. But one of those issues, if you remember, if you've watched our show in the past before, there are 4 questions that I presented to the United States Supreme Court to answer. And one of them, I don't even remember how I specifically worded it, but it was about the concept of harm. And if you have no harm, if it's not even alleged that you have caused someone harm, then you can't have, you know, some significant punishment. And perhaps the analogy or the analysis there could extend beyond to say any punishment, but certainly not something like a situation where you have a daily fine for all eternity when there was not even any harm alleged. So I think that is one thing that permeates with not only criminal cases, but civil cases, that there should be no punishment for doing something if there is no harm that is caused by doing it. And even take it a step back, there should be no rule, law, procedure against doing something unless doing that particular thing causes harm. Because we should have the uninhibited ability to exercise our constitutionally protected, God-given liberties however we see fit, so long as in the exercise of our own liberties, we are not infringing upon the ability of others to exercise their God-given liberties. That's the basics of it. That is what is meant when it says in the preamble to the United States Constitution that we, the people of the United States, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That's what it's meant. That's what is meant by that phrase. So, with that being said, that's probably what I would do. That's probably the one thing I would change. I mean, there are aspects of, you know, procedural aspects of family law that I'm well aware of that I would want to change. There are aspects of all kinds of other areas of law that I would want to change. But that's probably the biggest one. So, let's see. Okay, so Liberty Warrior tells me you have a new candidate for Ormond Beach City Commission. I'm interested to know about that candidate, so if you wanted to shoot me a message about that, you know how to contact me more so than most other people, so please tell me. I'd be interested to know, especially if they are running in zone, what am I, 2 or 4? I think I'm in zone, shoot, it's either 2 or 4, but anyway. Okay, let's see. Is Catherine running for commissioner? No, this is a public service. Not as far as I'm aware. Somebody has decided to create a candidacy for me to step into. They forgot to inform me. I'm willing to run for whatever God calls me to run. And it also requires somebody else to be the campaign manager and have all the people in place to do the campaign finances and all the stuff, because I have run a statewide campaign. I have run 2 statewide campaigns, want nothing to do with it, with that stuff. I'll go around talking to people about the law and the Constitution all day long, every day. I will serve the public. I will be an advocate on the city commission, or county council is backwards here from Michigan. But whatever it is, or sheriff or governor, I don't care, you name it. I'll run for whatever. Let's see. Okay, so just checking here. Question. Streamers reclipped. Question. So I am getting around 19 charges for pretending to pee on a school building or sign. I have proof that it was a water bottle, not pee, and there are cameras that saw it. Would I still get charged? So would you still get charged? Yeah, I mean, you can get charged because the standard of charging you is a lot lower than convicting you. But depending on the offense and what it is, in general, proof beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal aspect would be what would be needed, and that would be with all elements of the offense. So you'd want to look at, I don't know what state you're from, but you'd want to look up the actual state statute, and then you would want to, here's let's see, I'm writing myself jury instructions, writing myself a note so I can make sure to put that's a topic we're talking about here. But what I would do in your situation with the pretending to pee on a school building situation, look at the state statute that you'd be charged with, first of all. Read every single thing, print it off, memorize it, learn every single word, every single aspect of punctuation. Where are there commas and periods and semicolons and all the rest, because it all matters. Are there parentheses? Are there lists? Generally speaking, in the law, if there's a list of something and what you have is not listed in there, then it's not included. So there's just, anyway, you need to learn that statute inside and out. The other aspect to that is the jury instructions for that charge. So you need to go, I think most states have the criminal jury instructions for your state is what you would need to look up for that particular charge. And you might have several that would come into play. I know certainly when I was doing trial work as a public defender, I would have, actually, hold on a second. Okay, so I wanted to grab my trial binder because, so what I did is I would have my trial binder kind of outlined. I have OCD, so I'd have certain things. So I'd have my procedural outline of the case, and I would have the criminal jury instructions that would be relevant. Then I would print off the relevant court rules. I'd have an opening statement prepared. I'd have the common trial objections and rules of evidence, then common witness objections. I'd have questions, and then, different aspects, a couple other things. But when it comes to the criminal jury instructions, you have different things like judicial notice. You want to look up what kinds of things, these are just some things that if you go to, any of you have a trial, you want to be prepared to know what the, not only what does the law say that your offense is, but looking at the jury instructions it gives clear context to what the different elements of different things are throughout the case and what has to be proven and what is the standard of proof, what elements. So for example, a lot of this is talking about judging credibility and weight of evidence, character evidence, witness credibility, impeachment of a witness, presumption of evidence, burden of proof, reasonable doubt. So this is these are out of the Michigan criminal jury instructions, but each state has their own. So a person accused of a crime is presumed to be innocent. So this is something that would be read to the jury in Michigan for a criminal case. A person accused of a crime is presumed to be innocent. This means you must start with the presumption that the defendant is innocent. This presumption continues throughout the trial and entitles the defendant to a verdict of not guilty unless you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty. And then this is the part that I was really getting to. The second part to that, for this Michigan criminal jury instruction, every crime is made up of parts called elements. The prosecutor must prove each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant is not required to prove his or her innocence or to do anything. If you find that the prosecutor has not proven every single element beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must find the defendant not guilty. A reasonable doubt is a fair, honest doubt growing out of the evidence or lack of evidence. It is not merely an imaginary or possible doubt, but a doubt based on reason and common sense. A reasonable doubt is just that, a doubt that is reasonable after a careful and considered examination of the facts and circumstances of the case. And then, in case you just didn't believe me before when I was saying this, there is a note at the bottom here, and it says, this instruction must be given in every case. So the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because regardless of what jurisdiction you're in, you will likely have almost verbatim criminal jury instruction that would be included that mentions that. And so then you need to go and find what is the what is the jury instruction that would be relevant to that particular offense. And so there, again, could be a lot of different aspects there. But if you're charged with, I don't know what the crime is. Public urination, is that really you're talking about 19 different charges. I don't know what the 19 of them would be. But if public urination is one of them, I would assume the criminal jury instruction would have an element where you actually peed on something. And so if that's the case, if there's an element there that you actually had to have peed on something, then, and there's, not only can they not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did pee on something, but in fact, you have evidence to show that you didn't pee on anything and it was just pretending and it was a bottle of water and whatever, then I would assume that would be enough to give you the basis for a motion to dismiss. It still might be, they still might charge you with the offense, but as far as, having a conviction for that, I would think you have a good chance of fighting that. What else did I want to say about that? I don't know. I had something else to say that would be helpful for you, and I lost my train of thought. So, okay. Okay, I see that you asked the same question again, so hopefully you were still on now so I could see that you could see my answer. I would not, this was not a question for me, just more of a comment from Black Quiver that the Second Amendment is a license, I thought. And no, no, because licenses are actually, in my book, licenses are tantamount to unnecessary government control. So, versus the Second Amendment is just a blanket protection of rights. I think they're two very different things. I see where you're going at with it, but I would say no. Let's see. Sorry, I wish I had been looking at the comments because I'm losing context for some of what you were talking about. You guys had some great conversation. Well, and I don't know at what point in the conversation, Liberty Warrior, that you said we should never tolerate any registration of arms or ammo in America, period. I don't think ammo should be. I think that'd be really hard because how do you register ammo in the sense that I was talking about a voluntary registration and for the purposes that I was talking about to benefit you if somebody wants to try to steal it from you or, you know, claim some sort of fake ownership interest in your property. You know, as far as I'm thinking ammo, what are you going to show individual bullets? That the casings have serial number? I mean, I don't know what that would really do, but, you know, a gun would have a serial number, or you know, a vehicle would have the VIN number, things like that, where, you know, there's a benefit to the person if there's some sort of voluntary way to register, but not for purposes of required registration at all. Let's see. Exactly. There should be zero roadblocks to exercising an inherent right. Absolutely. Okay, so okay. So I'm not seeing the word question. I'm getting too much in the weeds here about comments. But I do like to read your general comments anyway, comments and questions to each other. Let's see. So. Okay, so I don't know what the context here was. I probably shouldn't even bother with it because there's obviously some other big conversation you guys are having, but somebody, be not yet 3236, was saying to John Q. Public, don't hide behind the almighty. Cancer is a real world example of why health insurance is supposed to say necessary, but there's a typo there. I don't know who you are, if you're, especially with the new way that they're showing display names and stuff like that, but I've never seen that particular screen name before. So I'm guessing you're new to the channel, and I will tell you, I have cancer and I had 3 major surgeries last year with the cancer and all kinds of treatments and things like that. And so it's not, I, as somebody who still has cancer, am saying I think it's disgusting that they're trying to require me to have insurance, especially the way that it's done at the price and cost level that they're requiring me to have the insurance and the whole 9 yards. I think it's bullshit. Anyway, so I am not seeing I don't know what you guys are talking about back and forth. Is what it is. But anyway, oh, did it skip a whole bunch? Okay, I finally got within the last 6 minutes here, and then it jumped. Oh my gosh, it jumped a whole bunch. Sorry, guys. Give me a second here. I am trying to make sure I'm not skipping any actual questions and not just chat amongst you guys. So Six Oaks Farm asked, did I find your email about the writ and have I heard anything about it lately? So I did just give the update part of it. I did get your email as well. And, you know, yeah, there's, I think one of the things, there are some things that you were pointing out, different, I think it's just, it can be such a complicated procedural aspect of where the case is at and what it is that I'm having to convince the court of at this stage that I think you were conflating a couple of issues of different arguments that were for different aspects. And so there was some of that, but there's other things that you mentioned that I think would be helpful for me to look at with going into the next phase if they decide to take the case. I'll say when they decide to take the case. So yes, happy holidays to you as well. Let's see. Okay, let me see. Shout. Yes, you guys, please take me up on, or take Jay Curvitt up on her comment there about shopping at Restore Freedom. There's the window decals. I do have t-shirts. I mentioned before that, you know, when Square screwed me over after being with them for almost 20 years, they decided I just had finally gotten too conservative consistently for them, that they no longer have me on there. PayPal is complicated for me. It's just not my cup of tea. It's whatever. It is what it is. So, and I just don't have enough time to mess with all that. And I had everything done and good and with pictures and options and quantities and the whole 9 yards for everything in Square. But anyway, so we do have shirts. If you guys are interested in shirts, you just email me, contact@restorefreedomkh.com. I'm looking at the shirts right now. But if you tell me what size you would be, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think any of them are the female cut. I think they're all just standard unisex t-shirt cut. But if you tell me what size you are, I believe we have medium, large, extra large, maybe 2X, but I think it's medium, large, and extra large are the main sizes that we have anyway. Let me know, and I can send one to you. I don't even remember how much they are. I'd have to look up what I just told Jay Curvitt when she bought one. I want to say that they were $10 a piece, and that's what I was asking from you guys for them. But anyway, that's so. But we have, of course, pop sockets, which would be great stocking stuffer, guys. Pop sockets, and right. So, question. Okay, so this is Blue Line Transparency. Can I discuss elements of a crime in my opening statements? Felony use of the word snitch. Subjective intent to threaten. I openly admit to saying that, but free speech is my defense. Okay, so can you discuss elements of a crime in your opening statement? So probably, okay, so there's a difference. You have to make sure that there's no elements of arguing in your opening statement. So it's very important to realize that at the beginning of a trial, you have an opening statement, but a closing argument. So opening statement is really meant to be, okay, so this is the case that brings us here today. These are, this is, if it's a criminal case, these are the charges that we're here for today. For each of these charges, here are what the specific elements are. And, as the prosecutor, they're going to say, we are going to show today through witness testimony and evidence and et cetera, that, each of these elements definitely happen, that you will have no doubt in your mind, certainly no reasonable doubt, that it did not happen any other way other than the way we're saying it happened. Whatever. You get what I'm saying. So as a defendant, I would think that you would be able to say the opposite, that you'd be able to say, these are the elements, that I'm charged with X crime, and these are the elements of this crime. They have to prove 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they have to prove each of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're not going to be able to do that today, because I'm going to be able to show you that I wasn't even there on the day in question. I'm going to show you that there was no intent, that the second element is mens rea, criminal intent, intent to do whatever, right? So anyway, you could go through, but your point is to say what you are going to establish in the trial. So it's an opening statement. It's an introduction to your case. The closing argument is where you pull it all together and you make those arguments and conclusions. So just be careful of that. Let's see. So, I'm just making myself notes. Opening statement, closing argument. Okay. Excuse me. Question. Did you talk about how abortion is covered under the 9th or 10th Amendment? I did not. So obviously if you're joining with that question, you're asking at 2:02. That's 2 hours into the show and I'm closing it down for the day. Oh my gosh, we're way over 2 hours today. Anyway, so I'm not going to start a whole new topic today, but our next show, if you have a question about that, definitely, call in at the beginning. So you missed earlier since you weren't at the beginning, but John Q. Public was actually in the live chat at 11:43 and was typing out his questions for me so I could see them before we even went live. The technology was actually working enough that it was displaying the live chat for me in OBS before I went live. And I was able to see what his questions were and just get mentally prepared to be able to have that discussion. So if you can do me that favor of typing in your questions even before our live begins next time, then that would be great, because I think with John, I think he was on the phone with us until 1:43. So it was almost 2 full hours that we had on that topic, because it was, we started at the beginning and I wanted to give it full attention. And clearly, Ninth Amendment issues, because they're not expressly delineated, need more attention and talking about anyway. And so anyway, a question about 9th and 10th Amendment would be welcomed if you wanted to bring that up at the beginning of our next show, which I was going to tell you guys, I don't think I'm going to do one on the 23rd. December 22nd is my 14th wedding anniversary with Mike. And then, of course, the day after that is Christmas Eve. And I just, I'm still not at 100% after 3 cancer surgeries, tons of treatments, different things, the battle with the city that's lasted 3 years now. There's just so much going on that I don't think I'm in a position to do that. Oh, that caller. Hello.
Catherine Henry.
Yes. Who am I
This
speaking
is Matthew
with?
Reardon.
Okay. So it is you. So I'm going to be honest, depending on how...
voice. Oh, it's you.
No. I wish you had called in like 10, 20 minutes ago, but depending on how complicated
I was dealing with
it is.
a crisis. Yeah, Derek, Blue Line Transparency, actually, he was, it was hitting me up. I was on the phone with an attorney. I'm glad I'm talking to you, because I've got a federal trial coming up on Monday, and it's the biggest travesty of justice that I think I've ever seen, and so I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on it. Just briefly summarizing, the government provoked the prosecution and then violently arrested me. They had circulated. I told you the last time I called in about them circulating the bolos, the U.S. Marshals at the federal courthouse. So what happened was they had the marshals had ex parte communication with the entire federal judge group to poison the judge pool. They knew what they were doing. 2 months before I was even arrested and charged, and then I had to basically, push super hard to get the judge that was on there recused, that was part of the communication and deeply involved in the communication. And then I found out last week that the smoking gun of evidence, which is the U.S. Marshals waving me up there to the front door. See, I was protesting down by the street, 100% constitutional ground, and I would have stayed there because that was the most visible spot for traffic to see my signs. But they waved me up there. So I'm saying this is an entrapment defense on top of First Amendment, but an entrapment defense. And the smoking gun of evidence, the U.S. Marshals have destroyed the freaking interior cams. Well, so they use a third-party company for the surveillance. And they had a duty, because we put in a notice to preserve evidence right away, like 5 days after I was charged. We just found out after 3 months of asking, where's this stuff? Where's this stuff? Having to put in a motion to compel. The U.S. attorneys finally answered back and said that through a technological error, that the video surveillance, it's gone. How convenient. This is one of the most shocking. I mean, like communication with judges. Judges want to stay on even after having that communication. And then they destroy the freaking evidence in a prosecution that they provoked by conducting illegal surveillance on a journalist and circulating bolos.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I can even have a trial on Monday. If, the new judge wants to hold wants to basically hear the argument for the motion to compel and why there should be sanctions or having it dismissed on the same day that I'm supposed to have trial. And I don't think that's fair. I think that's basically saying, well, that's predisposed. That's judge has probably already decided that. And,
I'll say not necessarily. So in my case, when I was violently and illegally arrested, and you could say there is an element of entrapment there on mine as well, because I was going down to a totally different county just to speak with the sheriff's deputy because he was trying to, he was unlawfully threatening other people, and I was their legal counsel. So he supposedly was welcoming me to come down and have a civil conversation with him about the law. And then once I got there, just was threatening and abusive and then violently arrested me. So, for trespassing when I was only there to talk to him. So, anyway, what was I going to say about that? So in my case, and keep in mind, in my case, they moved the trial date 8 times without my permission. I never gave my permission to move the trial date. They moved it 8 times. And of course I made speedy trial demands and all the rest. But in the end, and I had a series of motions to dismiss. In the end, I had a hearing on my motion to dismiss, and I want to say we were scheduled for June. They moved it to July. We ended up having a hearing on July 7th, 2023. It was either 2022 or 2023. But July 7th, because it was my husband's birthday. And that's when we were scheduled for trial, but we were first scheduled to have the motion hearings, which might seem very well that it would be a a predetermined outcome that, well, if we're scheduled for trial and we're doing this all on the same day, it's quick that it's going to be wham bam, thank you ma'am, nope, we're going to keep your case going and then let's just proceed to trial. But in my case, the judge tried as hard as he could to keep the frickin' case going for as long as he did, but he finally ended up dismissing it, albeit for the most dumbass wrong reasons that ever should have existed. He literally said he was throwing out my case because of where my vehicle was parked. A vehicle cannot trespass. The person trespasses.
Right.
But it was supposedly because my vehicle was parked on the grass and not on the pavement, whatever that matters. So regardless, my point is my case was dismissed right then and there. And then they had a year and a half into the case, they had added on disturbing the peace charge, which stemmed from the trespassing charge. And so he, ended up throwing out that charge as well with the trespassing charge. So anyway, it's not to say that just because it's done that way, that it's a predetermined thing, that the outcome is already set and they're just going to keep the case going and it's going right to trial. That is a very common occurrence to set things in that manner. I mean, there's a lot of things. So it's also common to have, 2 weeks ahead of time, you have all final pretrial motions have to be heard by that date, etc. But there are reasons why they could do it this way as well, because sometimes stuff comes up. So
well, and what I found out actually, which is where I was on the phone just now. They have been holding phone conferences out of my presence, and there's been so much screwed up shit that's gone on that I feel like I have a right to participate in my own case, to actually listen to, especially with the trust issues that I have. And I made it crystal clear to my attorney last time when he told me they wanted to have conversation that I didn't need to be on the phone. He didn't know I had called in, but I made it crystal clear to him that if there's another hearing, before trial, I better be a part of it, and so how about I find out through an email, through Pacer, actually. They held my pre-trial conference yesterday outside of my presence. And the attorney swore, if there won't be another hearing before your trial date, but if there is, I'll make sure you're there. He never emailed me, never called me, and the court is just as guilty because they never put any advance notice on Pacer, because the last time when they did that and they put the conference call information, I saw it in advance and I called in. And so it's like the court is playing into this conspiracy where, I mean, how is it a pretrial conference? A defendant's supposed to be there, right? I mean, like Jenna.
No, the attorney can waive the so for example, in our we were attacked by a neighbor who is violent and lost her damn mind. She came over with a sledgehammer and threatened my son, and then ended up threatening me the same day. Anyway, she recently had a hearing, and the next hearing is set for this week, actually tomorrow, and it's a pretrial conference for her. And the prosecuting attorney told me that the procedures down here, the defense counsel might very well waive her right to appear. Now, they cannot waive a right to appear if there's going to be a change in plea and an allocution or anything like that, because the defendant has to be present to change the plea. But if it's basically a status quo type of thing, or, procedural, things, different things like that, then they can do that where they're waiving the appearance of the defendant. So I would definitely get copies of the transcript of that hearing for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the most concerning thing about all that is the fact that in the motion to compel that he filed, it's like he's made great arguments, or good arguments, but the most chief argument he's failed to make yet, and I've even put him on notice of it. I've sent him an email and said, "Look, man, this is truly this is what the case is all about, other than just plain First Amendment, clear First Amendment." But the fact of I would have stayed down there by the road on the sidewalk had it not have been for them waving me up there.
Right.
But in no filing have you said anything about they waved me up there. That's been conveniently left out. And then, according to the minutes on the pretrial conference, nothing was said about it then. So why the hell is the most important key fact not
Well, okay,
being
so
said?
I could see why that would not be brought up, because that would be an element that's really an element of fact. It's not an element of law. And so because it's a factual element, it's something that belongs in the purview of the jury. It's not for the judge.
It's a bench trial.
It's a bench trial? Why is it a bench trial?
Because it's a petty charge. It's a loitering,
so it's a
disorderly
magistrate.
conduct. Yeah, outside of a federal courthouse, like blocking a door or an entryway.
Well, I could still see where it's because it's a factual issue and not a legal issue that they would be reserving that issue for the trial itself. Beforehand is where you're supposed to get all those legal issues all hammered out. But you're really not, it's not really, you don't want a case, and you have an interest in this. You don't want a case that has a little bit of facts dispersed all throughout different proceedings and there's not one trial. You want one trial. So it does make sense to me why, I mean, hopefully it's strategic and they're just doing that because they recognize that fact. But if I were you, if you're, talk to your attorney about it before Monday and make it clear and put it in writing. Put it in writing and get verbal confirmation from your attorney that they are going to bring that fact up about how they called you up there. Because if they do not,
no, they want to keep that. They want to keep that off the record because they were the ones that did it. I'm trying to raise it.
Who wants to keep it off the record? Your attorneys?
No, the marshals want to keep it off the record.
Saying.
That's why they destroyed the video.
No. I'm saying you need to email your attorneys before Monday, before your trial. You need to put it in writing that you are requiring them to bring that up because that goes to an essential element of the defense. And it needs to be brought up and get confirmation from them that they are going to bring it up. And then if the case starts going in a manner that is not, where they're not bringing that up, especially if it's been a while and, your chief case in defense has almost concluded, before it has totally concluded, if I were you, I would make a motion at that point to say, Your Honor, I need to, represent myself here because there is a chief element of my defense that my counsel has repeatedly failed to bring up to this court that we have talked about for months, and certainly I reiterated it before trial. And I don't know why my attorney is refusing to talk about this, but it goes to an essential element that shows to you why I don't have criminal culpability in this case. So I am requesting, and so I would make that motion to just fire your counsel on the spot and handle the argument on your own at that point.
Right.
So
because it's only a max 30 days in jail. It's all about creating a record, that's nobody knows my case better than me.
But keep in mind that your attorney is most likely going to call you as a witness, I would assume. And if they call you as a witness,
he is. Yeah.
Then,
I'm going to testify.
Yeah. So, you just have to, hopefully he's going to go over what the questions are with you that he has for you. And then you'll be able to figure out which question would make the most sense to be able to put that aspect of the answer in, because you have to answer the question that he's asking. But, if he's asking you just to say your name and date of birth or whatever for the record, that's not the appropriate time for you to say, well, the marshals called me up there that day. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you do need to kind of be able to figure out which question you can feasibly get that answer in. But that's what I would do. And So there's no jury instructions. I would still look up the federal model jury instructions, because even though it's a petty offense, so it's in front of a magistrate, there would still be, to some degree, there'd still be that, like the federal rules still apply. And
Right.
so I would find the appropriate federal criminal jury instruction for that offense. And
Okay.
because that would just help you, even though there's no jury to instruct, that's still the same elements that the magistrate would have to find beyond a reasonable doubt, the same as a jury would have. So
Yeah, they're having to bring another federal judge in from outside of the district. I mean, they've spent money hand over fist on a petty charge because the First Amendment's going on trial in 2025. It went on trial in 1971. We're going to find out on Monday if where the First Amendment still stands in 2025.
It's been going on trial already. I mean, I was helping, this is a public service, a standby counsel in his case, that I think we're still waiting for a decision on appeal, but it's been in trial. It's went through a magistrate trial for a petty offense, the whole 9 yards. I mean, so anyway.
Well, I appreciate it. I know you got other calls. I wasn't trying to take up all your time. I know you've been on here for a while. I'm fed up with it. I'm going to get signs, and I'm actually going to go protest this afternoon. National Fuck the Lying Ass Government Day. Fuck bad judges. Fuck bad cops. Fuck bad prosecutors. I'm so fed up with it.
Just make sure whatever you do is so far away from where that line in the sand is from right and wrong that there's no question that they can't arrest you now, because you just don't want to tank your logistically. You don't want to tank your resources and your opportunity to fight in court next week. That's my suggestion to you.
All righty. Well, I appreciate your advice.
Absolutely. Sure. And let me know how it goes. Our next call-in show will be the second Tuesday of January, because I'm going to take that the fourth Tuesday off this month. So the 13th of January, call in and let me know how it goes.
All right. Sounds good.
And it's over 30 days. So even if the worst case scenario, you should still be out by then. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, I can walk 30 days down on my fingertips, but I feel like it's a lot more than that. I feel like, I mean,
yes.
I feel like there's something a lot more darker and sinister behind it. So.
Oh, 100%. You got to keep fighting the good fight when you can. So absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in.
All right.
Good luck.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, guys. So lost my links. There we go. There's my links for the day to roll this. This is the longest episode I think we've ever done. We are now over 2 hours and 30 minutes. But that's okay, because we had some very important questions to answer. And, I'm here to help in whatever way I can. And I mean that. So with that being said, yes, I'm looking forward to having breakfast, actually. I haven't eaten anything today. So with that being said, join us the second Tuesday of January 13th at noon Eastern Standard Time. Lori just posted in the chat the link, which is also on the page, restorefreedomkh.com/donate. If you can donate even just $5 one time, that would be helpful. But certainly we have a lot of year-end expenses, as the annual expenses for me to maintain my bar membership so that I can legally continue to help people. We have the newsletter and the streaming and all this stuff, right? I can't even think of everything, but there's stuff. I have a PDF software that I have to renew every now and then so I can continue to put together legal briefs and amicus briefs and all kinds of stuff on cases. I cannot do that work without that software. There's no free version that allows me to do the things that I need to do. So anyway, what makes up for not having an episode? It makes up for not having an episode on the 23rd. I don't know what makes up for that. So I feel like I missed something. But anyway, yes, check out the resources that Lori is pointing out. And while I might have an answer for you by our next show, I actually got butterflies in my chest when I said that, that I'm just getting nervous about it, man. This is everything that I've been fighting for the last 3 years. So please continue those prayers every day between now and January 9th to pray that the justices will do the right thing and agree to take on the case this term. Oh, yes, I extended time today. The extended amount of time that we were on air today makes up for not being on in 2 weeks. There we go. That does it. And I do want to encourage any of you who have seemingly big constitutional questions, things that when we've talked about before, when people have brought them up, I've said that that's a big topic that we need to devote a lot of time to. Please call in with those questions at the beginning of a show so we could totally talk about it, go through it, analyze it, whatever. Especially if you have a topic that you're pretty confident that you and I are going to disagree on, give it the appropriate amount of time. Don't jump in at 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then want to pick a fight with me, so to speak. Let's give it time. Let's give it an appropriate amount of time and attention, and call in or type in with those questions closer to when we first start at noon Eastern Standard Time. So that way we can and really don't call in just to pick a fight, but if you want to call in to have a respectful dialogue and discourse, by all means, it doesn't matter the topic, we can go through that. So with that being said, I hope that you're able to glean a whole lot of information and education from this, and it's able to help you in your own quest and fight for freedom. And so in the next few weeks until we are back, make sure to check out that resources tab. Make sure to follow us on social media, and I'll be letting you know updates and things there. Don't forget for stocking stuffers to check out those Restore Freedom pop sockets and window decals. I mean, why would you not want to put on your vehicle a sticker that says Restore Freedom, more freedom, less government? Every single one of you here should be ordering one of those. One for you, one for your spouse, one for your friends and family and neighbors. So make sure that you guys keep that in mind, and they're not very expensive. The biggest expense at this point is the cost of shipping. So if you order a whole ton of them, if you want to order 20 of them, just contact me directly at contact@restorefreedomkh.com, and I can try to figure out what the shipping would be to reduce the cost of shipping to you. So with that in mind, I appreciate all of you joining in today and asking questions and having great dialogue in the chat, and for your support and prayers and all that all the time. So thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day and
Our
a
work
very
to
Merry
restore
Christmas.
freedom would not be possible without support from people just like you. From the various software and hardware needed to the legal research materials, every dollar you can donate helps. Make sure to like and share this video too. And remember to follow and subscribe and click that notification button. Together, we can restore freedom.